Good afternoon. My name is Adele. This is my book, Walking in Destiny's Footsteps. It's a novel about four people, Patrick, Justin, Raquel, and Morvina, how their lives meet, they lock, and they intertwine. It's more of a novel, so a romance, so I'm sure it will appeal to more women than men, but some men like romance. I do too. So I'm going to read a couple of pages and then I hope it inspires you enough to want to buy the book. It's available on Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes and Nobles, and a few other places. So if you just type in the title in the book section, you'll find it. So it's easier to find on Goodreads though, although that's only available in the States, I think. So it's available on every Amazon site in your country. So here we go. Are you sitting comfortably? Okay, here's the prologue. Dennis clutched his head again. Damn it, this wretched headache just doesn't seem to be shifting, he said in a somewhat irritated manner. We'll try some Anadine, responded Julie, who was struggling with the 2,000-piece jigsaw she was attempting to complete before the end of the week. I've had my quota for today, thanks, love. Dennis rubbed his head with his now sweaty right-hand palm and rose up from the tawny-coloured couch. I'll just have to go to bed early and hope for the best, I guess. Tell your mother I've gone up, will you? Yeah, okay, Dad. Sleep well. Yeah, right. Dennis let out a groan, held his head in his two hands, then without warning fell to the ground in a crumpled heap. Dad, Dad, what's wrong? Dad, talk to me. Dad! There was no response. The silence was deafening. Julie scrambled over to her father and shoved him. Still no response. What was going on? Why wouldn't he respond? She pushed him onto his front. He was a dead weight. She looked at his face. His eyes stared back. They had a vacant gaze. Julie waved her hand in front of him. His eyes continued to stare. No, no! Julie began to sob, hitting her fist into her father's chest. No, Dad, no! Her fist waved up and down in front of her without a target. She put her head on his chest and bawled. What else could she do? She checked his pulse in vain, hoping to find one, even if it was somewhat faint, but to no avail. Dad, Dad, don't die on me, Dad. Not now, not now. She just sat there motionless, tears trickling down her face with emotions giving way to a blank look. She sobbed silently. The next thing Julie knew was complete darkness and becoming acutely aware of lying on top of a cold, very dead father. She jumped up quickly, a shiver running down her spine. She looked up towards the ceiling with her tear-stained face. Oh, God, why him? Why my dad? What has he ever done to anyone? Standing at the funeral with her hands clasping the single red rose, ready to throw on the grave of her father, Julie made the resolute decision that her old life, the one she knew with her father, was going to be buried that day, along with him. She threw the rose into the ground and threw away her old life. Today she would be Julie no more, but Raquel, after her father's favourite film star. His memory would live on in her. Molly and Patrick stood hand in hand behind Julie, not realising the turmoil inside of her. She looked determined and strong-willed as she always did, and although Patrick was only 14 at the time, he admired her for that. Molly was crying too, not so much for the loss of Dennis, but for the pain of seeing her best friend so broken-hearted and yet so distant. Julie had adored her father and worshipped the ground he walked on. Now that Dennis had died, it seemed that Julie, her friend, had died too, and was replaced by another girl she did not know. Since that fateful day, when she had heard the news, she could not come near Julie to comfort her. When Patsy, Julie's mother, had invited her and Patrick around to see Julie, she tried so hard to comfort her. Julie would not even talk to her. Molly commented on what a pretty blue dress she was wearing, trying to break into her world. But Julie had been so spiteful that Molly swore never to talk to her again. She had run out, crying, and Patrick felt obliged to follow her, although he felt strangely torn between the choice of leaving Julie to mourn and consoling Molly. After the funeral was over, Molly made one more attempt to talk to Julie. She went up to her and tapped her on her shoulder. Julie, I'm here for you if you need me. I don't need you or anyone. My name is not Julie anymore. It's Raquel, she said with her back facing Molly. But I just want to talk to you, see how you are. I don't want to talk to anyone, to God, to Patrick, to my mum, and least of all you. She then turned round and looked at Molly with such an icy stare that Molly stepped backwards in shock. Now leave me alone to mourn, Molly, she said, and stormed off. Patrick started to follow her. Where are you going, Patrick? Asked Molly with such pain in her voice that he was forced to stop and turn back. From that moment on, Patrick knew the girl he loved and set his heart on to marry. Over the next few weeks, Julie began to change. She stopped being friendly towards Molly, isolated herself at school, and refused to talk to anyone apart from Patrick, who seemed to have a calming effect on her. Patsy was deeply concerned for Julie, who would only respond to the name Raquel. She took her to a psychologist in the hope of reaching her again. The psychologist did little to help and suggested Julie would grow out of it. He suggested that Patsy play along with Julie and call her Raquel, and that sooner or later she would be out of her grief period and back to herself. Chapter 1. Raquel woke with a start. She turned and looked at her clock. 6:15. How cruel. She didn't have enough time to go back to sleep, and it was too early to get up. How she hated it. She turned over to lie on her back and got to thinking about what lay ahead of her today. After 20 minutes or so of lying on her back, Raquel decided to brave the elements. Well, get out of bed and start getting ready for work. First stop was Frothy, the kitten she had just adopted from Patrick's mum. She filled up Frothy's food bowl and did a quick check on the litter tray before going into the kitchen and putting on the kettle. She looked disdainfully at the sink full of dishes. She just didn't understand it, where they all came from. It was so frustrating. She'd do one load of washing up only to turn her back for 5 seconds and see another sink full. It was the same with the ironing basket. She wondered if there was a conspiracy going on with the tooth fairy that she had offended when she declared at the age of 8 she didn't believe in it. Raquel had to smile to herself. Sometimes her imagination got the best of her, especially in the mornings when her brain wasn't quite in gear. Well, that was her excuse anyway. Patrick was coming round after work tonight, so she'd have to do a quick makeover of her kitchen before he arrived. She had a busy day at work today with a new woman called Morvena Letchworthenly starting. She tried to picture what Morvena looked like, but could not conjure up an image, probably because the name was so unusual. Still, she wouldn't have to long to find out. She hoped Justin didn't pay any attention to Morvena, a thought she tried to dismiss. She had no claim on him, so why did she care so much about what he thought? Trouble was, she did. Patrick looked at the appointment page in his diary. He checked to see what time his first meeting of the day was and flipped through the pages briefly. Sometimes he wished he could just hang up his hat and travel the world. But unless he came up with some formula or other to make him rich, his dream would just have to be that. He was going round to Raquel's place tonight for supper. He hoped it would be a Justin-free zone tonight. Much as he loved Raquel, he couldn't stand hearing about Justin 24/7. Perhaps it was because he was jealous. What did she see in the guy? It's hardly as if they were an item. By all accounts, he hadn't even noticed her. Women always were hard to figure out, but Raquel was the Queen of Sheba in that respect. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror and ploughed his hands through his strawberry blonde hair. He touched his hand to his cheeks and then let his fingers glide down his slightly bristled chin. He decided to give his face another day's grace from the razor and got to make him ready for work. Malvina was a little nervous about her first day at work. She couldn't believe she had actually got the job where there had been such fierce competition, and she felt she probably had the least experience. Still, there was no turning back now. She walked rather hesitantly into the building and towards the reception area. "Can I help you, ma'am?" said the gentleman at the front desk in a rich velvety voice that made her go slightly weak at the knees. "Yes, I'm Malvina Letchworthily. I'm new here." She felt herself go slightly red at stating the obvious. The gentleman seemed to let it go unnoticed. "And who will you be reporting to?" he asked in a kind manner. She fumbled in her bag, feeling even more ill at ease. After quickly scanning her contents, she found the piece of paper she was looking for. "Mr. Arkwright. All right, he can be found on the 10th floor. I will let him know you're coming. He'll meet you at the lift. It's usual practice here. The lifts are around the corner through the first door on the left and the second right." With that, he proceeded to pick up the phone and dial Mr. Arkwright's number. Malvina trotted off and immediately forgot the direction she had been given. She daren't go back for looking even more stupid than she already felt, so she wandered around a bit in a vague hope she'd find the lift. She walked past a mirror and could not resist the urge to take a quick look at her appearance. Not that she'd already done so 100 times at home, but still, it was best to check. She smiled at herself at the reflection in the mirror. The deep burgundy suit with the soft cream blouse was definitely the right choice, although she could maybe do with losing a couple of pounds. An infinite battle, as far as she could remember. Malvina had always wanted to lose a couple of pounds, no matter what her weight was, and those couple of pounds forever resisted. If you want to find out more, please buy the book. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.